American Steering Committee, we want to welcome you here today to kind of share some experiences about and with that you've had with Nate Long, one of our longtime and dearest members. One of the things about Nate that was fascinating to me is that I never felt as though I knew everything there was to know about Nate. And people who are here have different perspectives on him because they came into his life and he came into yours at different times. And also Nate never talked much about himself. So it was a wonderful thing for me to call people in Texas or get calls from people in France and say, oh yeah, I knew Nate, we were in things together back in 1950, and I never knew that he was even in the service in 1950, whatever. So it's kind of come together here. We want you to kind of share your experiences with us today and have just a nice conversation about Nate Long. But before we get going with that, I want to introduce Reginald Brown, who's also worked with me on this project, and he will have a few comments for you. So, Mr. Brown?
Well, thank you. Actually, we want to kind of jump into the conversation. The way we want to do this is as if we're sitting around, it's Sunday afternoon, we're sitting around a coffee table talking about a good friend of ours. And we're going to do this in a non-linear, informal kind of way. So let's start with Ann Branch, who I believe may have known him the longest.
Yeah, I guess that really dates me.
Well, he's a sugar pie man. You still are, really.
All right, you worked it really well. I was trying to put together a few notes of remembrance, and there was so much because I have known him for a long time. And I also brought some clippings of various things that I remembered that I was able to pull out, and I talked to everybody that I knew in Seattle, and I guess a lot of you I've either spoken to you or we've talked by email. So some of these I will share with you as well. And then I was also going through some sprinkles of Nate, and if you know Nate, you know his writing was very difficult to read, but it's just a few lines that I just wanted to share with you. There's a line in here that says, to love and to be loved is to feel the sun from both sides. Every person should have at least one friend, and right always wins. And this one says, love keeps time, so I'm content to let you shine, and even willing to walk one step behind. And if you remember him, he was always trying to elevate or push somebody up, so I was trying to remember those kinds of things. And it's really delightful to be here with Nate's friends. We were planning a reunion in Seattle from those of us who've known him for a long time, and so we didn't think the reunion would be without him, but I would have to think that Nate, being the way he was, is just having a howling time, watching us scramble around putting this together and sit here and doing all this. And he would be the one who would kind of take the back seat and let you do it. I met him in the 60s in Seattle, and Seattle was like becoming the most livable city, and so if you were about doing anything, you could be really a pioneer and do a lot of things. And so I was a counselor for some young people. It was something that was called Neighborhood House. And I was counseling some girls, like a big sister. And I was trying to find things for them to do. And it's interesting because I was really young and naive. Just moved to Seattle, just got from Texas, got married, and I was, really naive. These girls were like 12, 13, and 14. But they were so streetwise. I mean, they were all big people, all bigger than me. And so I was looking for things to give them some confidence and to make them, give them some things to be involved in so they would stay off the streets. And somebody told me about this guy who does judo classes, and that probably wouldn't cost us that much because we didn't have a lot of money. So I went and talked to him, and he said, oh yeah. So we brought the girls down and we started doing the judo classes. And the thing is that, Nate was, although he was involved in a lot of things, he was like really burly on top because he did this judo and boxing and all this stuff. And so we do the classes with the girls, but these girls were so aggressive. I mean, they were out to intimidate me physically. I would take them and bring them, but they would take over. So Nate said, we got to fix this. We got to do something because you got to get a little more respect here. So he had me come in on Saturdays and do an extra class. And so I would, get in there. He showed me how to throw him around and all this stuff and do the extra class on Saturdays. And so when we got together as a group, when we were all in class, they thought we were at the same level, but we weren't. So then I'd get out there when it was my turn, and I would go in and throw Nate on the floor. And when you hit the floor, I mean, you're taught to really slam down on the mat so it even sounds louder and louder. When Nate goes down, it's like, wham! And the girls were like, oh, okay. From then on, I had no other problem. But that was the beginning. Later, at the time, I was working for a brewing company, and I always wanted to do public relations. And of course, there's Nate, always encouraging you to do what you want to do. So I started doing public relations for nonprofit organizations, and that's how I got to do public relations for the organization that Nate was with. He started to develop, Model Cities was coming into play then, and like I said, if you wanted to do anything, you could do everything. And Nate was just there to tell you to go ahead and try it, go ahead and do it, whatever it was. So he wanted to do a special program for school kids in Seattle Public Schools, and he formed an outdoor education program, which was a camping program for inner city youth when there was no such thing. So from there, we got started to Oscar Productions, and he decided that Oscar Productions should be not producing Oscars, as people thought, but Oscar making material. And so he had this little place in the central area, which is like our part of town. And we would pull in big people like Tony Brown, and we had, along with Charlene, who's one of our community people, pull in, Nate started the very first community festival. We had Marilyn Van Peebles as our first Brad Marshall. He ended up bringing a play to the city that turned out to be a Broadway play, and we had it before anybody else had it. So people were looking at Nate and at Seattle like, if anything happens here, he does it, but because he really did. He was making things happen. So then in the process of Oscar Productions and doing the things with public schools, you know, we sat down and had one of our little brainstorming sessions and decided, you know, we should have a television show because the stations really don't represent what we're about and what's going on in our community. And so Nate wanted to do a television series, and you know, Commissioner Hooks was in the big house then, and he had laid down some mandates. So we went to the network and told them what we wanted. We wanted our own television show, and it was about us. Most people didn't realize it when we finally started to air because they gave us a regular series show, 30-minute series, each week that was continuously running, that we produced. And people thought it was like a typical show where you were just on TV, but it wasn't. We were writing the script, we were doing all the stage production, we were directing, we were doing everything. And so they lent us a technical person who was supposed to sit in on our album meetings and our script writing and tell us how to do it. Well, we decided that we want to do things that were not the norm, and he was not going along with our program. So we went back to the station, and I don't know how Nate figured this out, but he had me go with it because I was doing the public relations, of course, and I'm sitting there documenting everything, so I had my little pad. The two of us, you know, how I was intimidating, I will have no idea, but he was there. We sat there in the station manager's office and told him what we really wanted, and they knew that they had to give a certain amount of time because of the mandates that were set down. So he had me just sit there and take notes. And it was something about the fact that everything that was being said was written down. You know, it was almost more powerful than a recorder. So all I had to do was just sit there and look up every once in a while and just keep writing and keep writing. So we got everything we wanted. We fired the technical assistant, and we decided that we wanted our own director. And because he wasn't, of course, licensed, he couldn't be on his own. So we had their assistant sit in the booth with us. We made sure that we were sitting around, and Denise probably remembers, with all the headphones on because we wanted to know what they were saying about us when they were chuckling over the corner. We couldn't do or something.
All I remember was a huge afro on my head.
Yeah, didn't we all? And writing with very primitive equipment, because we had to do the teleprompter and write for days. But we had to ask for more time because this show took so long. But we continued to do it, and we just kind of got a chance to do it the way we wanted to do it. But one of the interesting things, which is really characteristic of Nate, is that we thought that the news that was on, since we had a regular TV series every week, we decided the news that was on was not really our news, and we wanted to have news that the networks didn't get, and that they weren't talking about us anyway. And we wanted to see people like you, people in Hollywood, know what you were doing and be able to pass that on to our community and so people really get involved. We knew who we wanted to see on television. So we wanted a news show. And we got together and decided, okay, we should have a news show, and we pulled in, keep people in Seattle. Norm Rice is now works for the network. There's a weatherman. Was it Frank Raines, who got very big with President Clinton, and he's now in Washington D.C. Jim Brown is now at the network, and we pulled in these people and decided what we're going to call this news show. And so we put our heads together. We thought the thing is that the concept is that it will be like grapevine news, which is our kind of news, and it will be things that everybody else isn't talking about. So we needed a name for it, and I don't know, there was a clip in it with the set with the news on, and it was called Aggin News, A-G-G-I-N. And so, but we didn't tell anybody how we got the name, and they would ask, well, how did you get that name? That's so different, that's so unique. And we wouldn't tell anybody. But if you just kind of reverse it and spell it backwards, you'll see how we got the name. And the station never knew. It was like his way of thumbing his nose at his sister. Let's see, I was going to tell you. He also would bring various talents like Harry Belafonte to town, and when any of the celebrities came on, we didn't know that Nate also was doing security for various celebrities, and so he would invite us to come. He said, you want to come down, you want to see a show? And we'd all go, and you didn't know it, but you were standing guard at somebody's door. And he's like, oh, you just stand there, don't let anybody go past her. And then when Watch Stacks came out, we wanted to really be unique. So we had in Seattle a champagne theater party, and it was a bizarre party. So you were supposed to come like that era, and you were supposed to dress as bizarre as you could. And we had champagne, we had the movie, and we had signings, and we had all the celebrities that we invited. It was unusual because they were saying, like, what are they doing over there? Nobody knew. But it was like a first, everything was a first for Seattle, because Nate would decide, let's do something nobody else is doing. And that's the way he was. And if you had some dream or some aspiration for a career, and you wanted to do it, he'd say, okay, you can do it, you can do it. And he would just let you go. He would, once he got you going, he was gone. And he would take off, and you know that when he would move from one city to another, he would start something and he would be gone again. That's kind of the way he was. Let's see. He also did his. I on the other side, on the sideline, did my own line of designer clothes, and Nate was determined to somehow use his celebrity to push that. So he would come and do Christmas shopping with me every year, and send. Maybe some of you received some gifts from him from somebody. Well, or sometimes I would ship them for him, and he would have me send something that I had designed for him. And the interesting thing is that I think he was saying that in addition to everything else he was doing, he was a designer. So everything, because this was Nate's design. So I said, okay, whatever works, this is Nate's design, he was shipping to you. I remember when he started a cable company in Seattle, and along with a friend of his, Bill Johnson. And then Nate later went on to St. Louis and did the paper thing. But I read some papers about him talking about what he did, and I guess the bottom line was that he saw a friend who wanted to do something, and it's like his goal was to go on and help you. So he took off and went and did that. So in the process of coming here, I was trying to call everybody who knew him, and I found a man who was his best friend who was in the military. His name is Pat Patterson. And Nate had tried to see Pat just before he left Seattle the very last time when he went this last trip, when he came through it just before he got sick. So I found Pat later, and we sat down to just see if Pat had any photos or anything he wanted to share. He knew I was coming. And so I kind of scribbled some comments that Pat made. Pat was the person who was with him in the military, and it just seems that Nate was always this bigger than life person, even when he was in the military. He did a lot of boxing, he played football, he was just tops at everything, and he, as I understand it, was a sergeant, and he was the only one who had the okay to arrest officers. So when they were in France, and I guess there was any problem, they would send Nate out as a one-man army. They would send a van with a driver. That was it. And he would go, the guy said, he would just go and clean the streets. He could actually arrest the officers. And that was like not done. You don't put your head on an officer. They did it all by himself. and we had a photo of him standing in the corner, but he said that Nate was always he was the one who was very procedure conscious, and so if he would see you in uniform, even though he just got through partying with you, whatever, it was very exacting, and he still kept that stance. But later he wouldn't even talk to you if he was in uniform and he was out on a mission. But I thought it was fascinating. He said also that Nate was a coach football player, and I have some football player photos of him. Pat also was best man in Nate's wedding, and this was when they were in France. And as he was telling me the story about the wedding and all the things that were going on with them when they were in France and when they were having such a great time. And it turns out that Nate is Nate's wife, or his ex-wife, Gigi, was the daughter of an African chief. And her father, and her grandfather also presided over the wedding. And he was very high up politically. In fact, he was a confidant of French President de Gaulle. And he was so well known, in fact, that Nate's wedding was publicized on national television. So I have some of those photos to share with you also.
Terrific.
Well, thank you.
Sure.
But I have a prayer I'd like to be with you. Okay. Father, thank you for bringing us together on such a special occasion to remember such a special friend. Help us each to take away something that will not only enrich our lives, but uplift someone else's life, just as Nate would do. Most of all, make everything that we think, feel, and do pleasing in your sight. And we know it's a done deal because we're asking it in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Ivan?
Wait, Charles, you have something to say, because you knew him since 1970, and you can share a story about Africa and Max Julie.
I'm going to have a positive story. If I start off that way. I've known Nate long since 1971. I met Nate through Tony Brown. I used to be Tony Brown's right hand. My mother used to call me Tony Brown Spunky because I used to always follow him behind and do the things that I thought were necessary to help him, because I thought that we were doing those things to help black people. Tony was the executive director of Black Journal, and at that particular time, and he was in the process of forming Howard School of Communications. He was a lecturer at Washington State University, and he went to Seattle, and he came back and said, I met this guy. This guy named Nate Long. He's real interesting. He's getting ready. I invited him out here, and I want you guys to treat him nice. So I had to go pick Nate Long up. And if you know Nate Long, you know this. Nate Long is not understated. He's very, 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 very understated. I mean, you really don't know that this man here is Nate Long when you start reading these things. And I used to use the analogy that if you were in a room and someone said, here's this guy who has a black belt in karate and judo, speaks fluent French and Japanese, that has produced movies, who has he used football, starred in the Air Force, military police. He was also the first non-Japanese person to be trained at the Japanese police corps. You go in the room, and there are 30 people. You pick 29 other people. Then you look at Nate and say, you can't be Nate Long. And then you dismiss the whole thing. But that's the way he was. He was a very matter-of-fact person. He was always a project manager. He was always attempting to do things. And if he liked you, he gave you work. I mean, he just did. I mean, that's the way Nate was. He was a very solid person. If there was all exciting, if everything was exciting, tables turned over, everything else, Nate said, well, I guess we'll just have to start from it again. You know, he just had this manner about himself. But the first thing that struck me about him, getting to know him, was in our circle, we used to talk about folks all the time. And poorly, sometimes well, we talked about people a lot. And I noticed that when Nate spoke ill of someone, he never mentioned their name. And if he mentioned your name, he wouldn't speak ill of you. And I had never seen that in a black person. And we used to, I used to study because it was just so out of the norm for my circle. And I really started liking it because he just never spoke ill of people whose name he mentioned. He was just an extraordinary person in the sense that no matter what you asked Nate to do, he could do it. And he would, as I was just sharing, as Nate would say, you start by starting and you do by doing. And that's what Nate did. I mean, he didn't have fear. He just had situations that he had to overcome. I was with Nate, and he and I rode to New York together, and he was going to, I believe it was Nigeria, to work with Max Jr. on a movie that he was doing there. And he came back early. He came back after about 5 weeks, and he said, "Chuck, I'll never want to see them folks again." And I said, "Nate, what's the matter?" He said that they wouldn't listen to him. He was the production manager, but he couldn't get the natives to follow his orders. So what he did, he hired this white guy, and he would tell him to tell them what to do. And then they would do it, and he really hated that. And if you knew Nate, he doesn't, even when he hates somebody, it's understated. So he doesn't really get real upset, emotionally. He just doesn't bother those people anymore. But I just think he was just a great person for many people to emulate. He also, for a male, had a lot of women around him all the time. And if you collect pictures, you'll see very, very few men and a whole lot of women. And not that that's a bad thing. But the first time I came to Los Angeles, it was when he was helping with Darktown Struggles. And I was going to Hollywood, and he said he had this place, and I expected this huge, humongous place. We had this little apartment. And he brought some of the people over this place to talk over the production that day. And I just loved the fact that I was sitting behind Nate Long just looking at the stuff. And I'd always hear about how you had to hug people when they first came in, and how you had to make sure everybody was all right. And he just had many, many, many different stories, and I really don't like talking too much about it because I always miss stuff. And I'll just tell you another little thing that happened. Nate could design things, and he was going on sets, and he wanted a bag that he would carry. This was back in 74, 75. So he drew this picture, and I was working in Mexico at the time. He says, "Find someone to create this bag for me." So I went out and got one of the local guys to make it up. And I thought something was wrong with the guy carrying a purse around. And but I was going to make it for Nate anyway. And I went back to LA to give it to him. On the way of taking it, I had it over my shoulder, and I got about 10 compliments. So I went back and had my own made because I had to have mine bigger and wider and everything else. It fell apart, but more than likely Nate still had it. Still in good shape. But I think that's started that.
Thank you, Charles.
I think around the early 1970s, Nate produced 2 award-winning shows, and Joe Wilcox was a director and a DP on it. Joe, can you kind of share some of those memories and some of the people that are around you that experience with South by Northwest?
Yes, I got a telephone call one night, and this guy came on and he said, "I'm Nate Long, and I would like to hire you to become a director up in Seattle." And I said, "Well, what's the company name?" He said, "We don't have a company name." And I said, "Okay, how do I find you?" He says, "I'll find you." And I said, "What's the fee?" He said, "There is no fee." So he said, "Are you interested?" And I said, I think I'm interested. What is it about?" And he said, "It's about black people going to the Pacific Northwest. These are basically runaway slaves, and they end up in the Pacific Northwest. And he said, what do you think about that? And I said, I would love to do that. And he says, well, catch a plane and come up here, and when you get off the plane, I'll know who you are. I got off the plane and I met this big strapping guy who had these ideas. And he said, now one thing I don't know is how we're going to get actors up here. Actors and actresses. He says, I know some that I would like. And he said, but I don't know how to get them. And I said, well, you pick up the phone and you say the same thing you said to me. Only you can offer them first-class airfare, roses when they get here, and a nice place to stay, and dinner. And that's it. You offer them that and see what they say. So that's what he did. That's what he offered. And we had the likes of Denise and Bernie Casey and Dick Anthony Williams, Vanetta McGee. It was incredible. The people that offered themselves and their talent was, they offered more than that. They offered their souls to us. They trusted us in such a manner that it made me really feel like, what does this guy have? What does he do to make things work? Everything works. If there's a problem, he changes the problem and makes it work. For instance, we had Esther Roll. She was playing the role of Stagecoach Mary. Now, Esther Roll looks like Stagecoach Mary. And when we got up there in that snow, we were in about 4 feet of snow, and we had these cameras, and these huge cameras. And when he would fire up a camera, the guys in the truck, they were all white, engineers, technicians, they'd fire up a camera, and they'd get it set, then they'd fire up another camera. The cameras would never match. So I said, well, try firing them all up at the same time. So they did that. Still, the cameras would shift. The weather was playing havoc with them. And what Nate said, well, you know, why do we have to have these cameras? Why can't we just use one camera and it'll match? So we threw the other cameras up, and Nate said, okay, let's go. And we started shooting. And the funny thing about it was it got dark around 4 o'clock. And everybody thought they were going to go home. Nate said, well, we got another scene to shoot. So I said, we don't have any lights. He said, there are truck lights. So we surrounded the set with trucks, turned on the high beams, took a flashlight for backlight, and we shot Esther Row in the snow. The engineers blew gaskets. They couldn't believe what we were doing. And I said, well, what's wrong with it? He says, well, we need 80% in the green. And I said, well, look at the television set. And I went over and I turned off his vector scope. And I said, forget the scope. Look at the TV set. It looks great. And that's how we shot. And the rest of the picture went pretty much the same way. Anytime there was a problem, he had an answer for it. And that's what I liked about Nate Long. And he was such a great guy, and I, to this day, take my hat off to Nate.
Thank you.
Can Dick or Denise join in on that?
Oh my God, Denise. Well, I met Nick the first time when I did the talk show in Seattle, which was a long time ago. In the 70s. Like I said, all of us had big hair then. Real big hair. So that was the first time, but when the opportunity came up to do an episode of South by Northwest, that was when I came to understand what he was really doing, what he was really about. Because all those things were wonderful, but South by Northwest had, for an actress, it had the mystery, the mystique, and the loveliness and the beauty that you dream of when you come into this business. So it was an opportunity for me as an actress to do a period piece, to wear those great costumes that the white actresses got to wear, and a Gibson wig with my hair all up. And it was a chance to go to Montana and work on location in an old western town, and to go up into the Glacier National Park. I mean, it was just really a great work experience. Great work experience. My half-sister from New York came out and stayed with me in a hotel in, where were we? Nevada City, Montana. And we were sleeping in the hotel room, and she said, Denise, did you hear something? And I said, what? She said, listen. So we said, what in God's name? This is like the Wild West up there. And so we went out on the balcony, and there was a cattle drive down the middle of the street. I said, this is the greatest experience of my working life. I mean, it was just so great. And it was great to work with Dick Anthony and the other cast members, and with Joe. Always great to work with Joseph Wilcox. So I have to thank him for that experience. Got an opportunity to wear one of those old dresses, just like the white girls do.
He's a guy, as far as I know, that I admire, and I admire him particularly because of his strength, and the fact that he didn't grab the limelight, he didn't reach for the limelight. He was in a much more important position, and he did much more important things. And when I first met him, I thought that he was so quiet and so much in the shadows of life. I thought he might be an undercover or something. He's coming out of the black nationalist movement and all that stuff, and I would get tabbed, for something much more than I was because of the hair and where I was. And I was a little suspicious of it, but it was a wonderful experience going up to Montana with Denise, with Wilcox, and it's just. And I had forgotten about the cattle drive down the street. That was like, I'm from Chicago. I don't know nothing about cattle. That was an amazing experience for me. But my thing with him always was, whenever I saw him, was, Nate, I've never seen this thing that Denise and I did. I'll get you one. I'll get one for you. Okay? That's been going on for years and years. This is the first time I've ever seen any part of it. He's an amazing man. He's a black man I really will call a man. Now, my number one man is over there, Ivan Dixon. That's the man for me always. But behind him, Nate is there. Thank you.
Have to rise up.
I cannot recall when I first met Nate, but I knew him so long. I think, in my memory, he was in some way associated with a magazine. And we were doing something on martial arts because he was a black belt martial artist, and I had studied martial arts. And there was a very quick synergy, there was a very fast friendship formed, because he was the kind of a man that I respond to, which is an old-fashioned, no-nonsense, your word is your bond, steadfast guy. And that's what appealed to me, particularly in Hollywood, where everybody is flossing, flashing, and full of you-know-what. So I had the opportunity to work with him on 2 of those episodes about the Northwest. And we also, I did a film called Hitman, and he played a heavy in it. And he had one line, he used to laugh about that. He had one word to say, it was Zero, which was the mafia man who had done bad things. So when he found out who it was, he said, Zero. And then they wouldn't kill the mafia. That's a joke. There were a lot of those films, remember that? They used to give the mafia, ha ha ha! But anyway, it was, Nate was always, I think because he was so calm, and he was so centered, I think a lot of that was the martial arts philosophy that they housed and are nurtured by. So he never panicked. And he was very honest. We had no money to do those episodes, but they were important parts of American history and Black history. Joe and I were talking just when I arrived about this little town in Washington.
Yes, probably Montana.
Where the mines were.
Oh, where the mines were. Yeah, that was in Roswell.
Roswell, yeah. And the mayor was black. And he was the only black man in town. And we had asked that, we said, how is it that you as an African American becomes the mayor of this town and you're the only black person in town? He said when the Great Migration manifested and all the slaves and ex-slaves moved west, his folks and family were part of that. And as it was wont to be, they all, as things manifested, left and went on their own journeys, and he was the only one left, and he was on the city council, and he was the most knowledgeable person about the city and the gathering. And they simply voted for him. Not because he was black, he was the most qualified person. That was rather extraordinary to me. We spent some time, when a person can bring you moments that you never forget, just by the association, it's as if Providence blesses you, and from that moment you are made better. We were out on the prairie, and I had never met real cowboys. I saw them in the movies, but we were amongst real cowboys. So we shot for about 4 days, riding horseback and herding cattle. Myself and Thomas Vasalala. And were you in that with us?
No,
Not that episode. I can't recall. 4 or 5 of us were cattle herders. And these little cowboys who lived in a trailer, and they simply rode horses and carried guns and everything. And they worked on this ranch, remember that? And their ranch was 30,000 acres. And there was a group that all they did was fashion and fix the fences. By the time they got around the land, it was time to begin to fix the fences again. And so we had those kind of conversations, and it was just, they were chewing tobacco and kids, yeah! Cowboy boots and hot damn! I'd never seen a real cowboy. And they had a monthly wage they had, and they would go out to the little town in the month and get drunk and whore around and all that stuff, like in the movies. It was unbelievable. But all the while, I had the opportunity to work with these tremendous actors, and there was never one tantrum. You know, that's rare. No one got full of themselves or egos got out of control. We knew we had no money. I guess we got scale, didn't we? We had to get the scale.
Yeah, I think it was about scale.
Yeah.
It was close to scale.
And we all took such pride in the character we played, because I played in that episode that took place in the mines a real person who had existed and was a part of the reason why the blacks had come to the Pacific Northwest. And so it was educational, and I just never forgot Nate's steadfastness, his dependability, his responsibility. He was a person, you just asked him something once, and he did it. He would never forget what you said. He was just an extraordinary guy. And I did not know he had passed until I got a letter from Mr. Webb. So I was stunned, because I hadn't talked with him in probably 2 or 3 years. But he will always be a part of my heart and my pleasant memories about Hollywood. I have those too, and some that are not, as we all do. But, and to say something that Dick said, and this man here is part of my pleasant memories. God bless you. So it's nice to see. The sad part about it is we come together for this kind of a thing. It is joyous and at the same time sad-making, because we see people we haven't seen in a long time. We see all of us change and age, and the kids get grown. You go, wait, how old are you in med school when you're 7? So it's just, it's a wonderful reckoning, and I thank you for having me here.
I wanted to say something too. My name is Dee Charlene. I'm from Seattle, Washington. And I think I knew Nate the longest. I met him in 1961. And he was just getting out of the service, and he had came to Seattle with Gigi. I'm a hairdresser, and she was a hairdresser. So I knew him like that. Then he opened up his karate place at Dearborn Street with Lucille Fisher being a hairdresser on one side, him on another. I helped him, as she said, with the first parade, black parade they have. I have pictures of Denise when she came there too in Seattle, and I was with him when he had Melvin Van Peebles there, and I was the Miss Hot Pants Queen thing that he had. I wear a lot of flashy stuff, and Nate always liked that, because see, no one was wearing that kind of stuff that, like I was wearing blonde hair way back in the 60s, and it got me everywhere I wanted to go. And also doing real estate at that time, and Nate was trying to get his business going, and he was doing pretty good, and he started Oscar Productions. And so he got that, and he came up with the first black TV type series that we had. In Seattle, we had Eddie Rye, and I just now found out that Ann was working with him too, but I was on the program with purple hair and green hair, and that triggered it off and fascinated him. The different looks that I would bring. They were robbing me a lot at that time. I was opening up the runways for black women to do runway modeling in Seattle. And it's a very racist city in Seattle, and we're still battling that now. During this time, they had killed JFK in 1964. They started going across the country, killing off all our black leaders. We were doing a lot of marching at that time. In Seattle, they killed William Pratt in 1969, one Sunday afternoon. Went over and shot and killed him. And we had a big, big rally and a big march. And I have it on my cover of our Central Chamber book, one of them. Nate was right there with us, and he was right up front. And you know, what I've loved about Nate through the years that I knew him, he was a very kind person. I loved him for his honesty. He always called me boss lady, as we call it. 1976 on May 14th, I had to shoot in the PI newspaper. They were breaking in my shop. The white developers was driving all of us out of the central area, the urban area, on the corner property that they want. And so I said, shoot, I can't fight these guys. They got more money than me. So I shot in the PI. And so Nate, then I moved a portion of my salon over to Bellevue. That's over where they are, where all the rich, all the money, right down on Main Street. So Nate called me. He said, Charlene, I flew in Seattle to come. I'm so worried about you. Someone told me all of this. And now, and I've got to see you. So I went out. I said, where are you? He said, I'm at SeaTac. He said, come have dinner with me, please. So I went out there. He said, I'm worried about you. So I went out and I saw him, he looked at me, he said, "Oh, wait," he said, "you look good like a ray of sunshine." He said, "Somebody told me something wrong." I said, "Well, don't believe everything that you hear." I said, "Those people have more money than me." I said, "and they were trying to, take me out." I said, "So I just let them pay for whatever they were looking for, and they got it. They got the gun, the shots and the whole bit." He said, "Well, let's do a story on it one day." I said, "We will." And so he was telling me about what he was doing. And I formed Central Chamber in 1983, which was the same time Nate was trying to get CCOM started. And they were giving him a hard time, so he called me. He said, "Boss lady, I need you. You gotta come help us. We gotta get this going." He was working with Bill Law and Leonard Berry. And they were giving him a lot of flack because blacks is hard to develop anything that's going to make any money. So I said, okay. So I came in the room and looked at all of them. They looked at me and they signed the papers. But ladies, I told you was boss lady. So we formed a relationship like that, and our relationship was good. We did Black Film Fest in Seattle in '92, but Nate was he was a wonderful person. He was honest. He was mild spoken. And this is why people, when they said that he was going to do something, he didn't procrastinate like a lot of people. He got the job done. He was a dependable person, and he was committed. And that's what I love about him. He was committed, and he would always take care of business. You can always count on him taking care of business. And that's what I like to remember him as, a person that was mild spoken, and he took care of business.
But there's still a few people from Seattle who'd like to speak. I believe Pearl Thomas, you have a TV show called Pearl's Place. Can you share a story with us?
It's actually, I have so many stories. First of all, I wanted to say thank you to a couple people, Betty, wherever she is, thank you for helping to take care of him, for Ann, for everyone in here. In fact, I noticed that he used to tell me that I am who my friends make me. And so we're supposed to be here. And I think that it's yes, it's a sad occasion to be coming together about, but I'm so honored to meet all of you because I've heard all about you. He's spoken to me about one of you or all of you in some way. And so it's an honor. And I think that if there's anything that Nate has instructed us to do, and we must do, and that's to stay together. We have to keep in touch and keep on pushing. And to him, push meant perseverance, understanding, surety, and humbleness. And that was his push. But I met him in 1982. I had just finished becoming Miss Black Washington, and then I was second runner-up in the Miss Black America pageant. And I came back to the TV show on Channel 4 to show him the video of the pageant. He says, "Well, I want you to go on a TV show." And I said, but Nate, I've never done television. He goes, "You can do it. You're up there on the stage. You can do this." So he says, "I want you to talk to a lady named Ann Branch, and she'll tell you everything to do." So I actually never met Nate for a year. I talked to him on the phone as an executive producer of Oscar Productions Action Inner City, and I did some spots with Ann. And one of them was this remote thing, kind of a location thing we did called the Mobile Dental Healthcare Unit. And so I was showing how this unit went around to the elderly and the disabled and did dentistry. So again, he shoved me into things that I had no idea what to do or how to do it, but somehow I learned to do it. After that, Nate decided to, of course, first of all, I want you to understand, it was the first black cable company in Seattle, and there are not that many in the country. And he did start that cable company called CCOM, and he had me there as a sort of a floor person. I learned to run cameras and edit and everything of that nature. After that, he says, "Well, I'm going to have a party for the cable company." He goes, "And here's my list, and you just call these people and get them here, and I'm going to have a party, and it's going to be at this mansion, and here it is." So I got the list, and on it was Denise Nicholas and Vanetta McGee and John Amos and Esther Roll and Ivan Dixon. I was like, whoa, I'm calling these people, inviting them to a party. I don't know who they are. They're going to come, and they all came, So it was a wonderful gala party that he threw at a mansion there. And again, he said, "But I'll never again tell you, Pearl, there's no limit to the budget." Because I kind of spent as much as I could. But if you'll notice, Nate knew how to do things with no money. I don't know how he did it, but he had no money, but he made things happen. And I think there's probably several women in this room that he called boss.
Yeah.
Because I was one of them. And it's so interesting that that's what the women that he loved, he called boss. And I think that each one of the women here believe that we're one of his sweethearts. And every one of the men here believe that you're his best friend. And that's just how he made you feel. And so I celebrate that about him.
He knew where his strength came from.
Yes, he did. He did. He used to tell me, you know, women don't fall in love, you stand in love. You don't want to fall like you're falling off of a cliff, you want to stand in love. After we had that project, Nate then went to Detroit, and he was a banking executive. I'm like, okay, now you're in Detroit, and you're executive VP of a bank. Okay, now what are you doing, Nate? So he said, well, what are you doing? He says, well, there's this issue with welfare to work, and I want you to start a program. I said, okay. So he arranged for me to get some funding from the state, DSHS, and Employment Security, and I transitioned over 150 women from welfare to the workforce just by teaching them basic work ethics and life skills. And this is another thing that I had no idea what I was doing, and next thing you know, I was doing it. So a little after that, Nate says, well, Pearl, it's time for you to go back on television. That's when he was at Seattle Central Community, and he had the video show there. So he went to Channel 5, which was the largest station in the city, and our affiliate was NBC, ABC. And he said, okay, he went to the head of the station and said, we're going to do this. We're going to provide for you all of the camera people and all the work and the labor, and Pearl Thomas is going to be the moderator, and are you ready? We are. Let's do it. And it was done. So we couldn't figure out the name of the show, and we had several different ideas. We wanted to do something of sort of a public affairs type programming of interest to the community, and we decided to call it Pearl's Place. So I said, okay, Pearl's Place. And so on the day of the filming, I went into the studio, and they had got this furniture that was just horrendous. It was like rental furniture, and I turned into a prima donna and said, I won't do it, I won't film. And Nate said, you need to calm down because we got this far. And so he decided then to film the show out of my house. And I have the video in the car. So we actually filmed Pearl's Place. And if you can imagine my neighbors when they saw the Channel 5 vans rolling up with the microwave disc, they thought there was like a murder or something in my neighborhood. And that's where we filmed the show, Pearl's Place. And it ran for about 6 months, and we were on television on Sundays at 10 o'clock at a great spot where we kept getting preempted by Wild World of Sports. So our show, you know, is extended further and further, but it was a very interesting show in that we did a movie review and a book review, and we had Aubrey Wright, was also, who's not here, but a very, very dear friend of his. And we did a segment called Seattle After Dark. And we went around and kind of in a limousine and kind of showed what was happening in Seattle and also what wasn't happening. And what it was kind of funny was the video of the disco was actually something he got from Studio 54 in New York. So people thought they were seeing Seattle. It was actually a video of New York. So that was Nate. But you know, I want to say to you that, you know, all of us are better because of him. And I think that you can hold that to you. Everyone in this room will know that because he touched our lives and the way that he touched our lives, and even the way he left our lives, because, you know, that's just like Nate. He died on my birthday, and I told him, I said, Nate, don't you do this. Don't go on my birthday. And that's what he did, because I didn't want to have to remember it all on that occasion. But, you know, I'm sad for his departure, because we will all miss him. But look at what you got when you had him. He touched us in so many wonderful ways. And what he taught me to do was to think outside the box. If someone says I can't do it, then that's when I probably believe the most I can. On the day of my show, he had Oprah Winfrey call me, and he said, he handed me the phone. And she said, this is Oprah. And I said, yeah, right. And she said, no, this is Oprah Winfrey. I'm calling to tell you that you shouldn't believe anything that people tell you when they say that you cannot do it, because I have a pageant background and now I'm in television and you can do this. So just, you know, and I was like, ha, ha, ha. I could not say anything because I, first of all, didn't believe it was her. Another funny occasion was I was at his house when he lived in by SeaTac, and he was talking on the phone to Mike Tyson. He then again handed me the phone, and I hear Mike Tyson go, hello. So he was constantly doing these really surprising things to me. But again, I think that of all the stories that I'm telling here and that you're hearing in the room, there's a similarity in his style. That he was a mogul, he was a father, he was a friend, a brother, and we loved him for what he was, and what we can do to I think, keep his memory alive is to do the things that he taught us to do well. And that's to always think outside your box and don't let anyone tell you what you can't do.
We want to save Ivy for last because they were born on the same day. Two Aries brothers making it happen. Well, you want to speak now? Okay, brother.
I'm not going to say very much. It's just that Nate was a very special guy, of course, as everybody has said here. The first time I realized that I knew Nate was about 30 years ago, I guess, 25, 30 years ago. And he had been in my life for about 5 years. He just kind of slipped up on me. You know, I mean, I just didn't know that he was there. And he invited me up to Seattle to be a part of his cable company. I didn't want to be a part of a cable company, but he invited me anyway. And he and, what's his name, Johnson?
Bill Johnson.
Yeah, had me up there. And ever since after that, they kept having me up to Seattle with Denise and with Bernie and, you know, others. It just happened to be a thing. And we would go to Seattle and stay in the most fabulous hotel and eat the most fabulous meals. And it was incredible. And how this guy did this stuff, you never know. That's why we thought he was an agent. Particularly we thought he was an agent. Because I was trying to make the spook and sat by the door, and I just knew everybody was an agent. So, I mean, you know, I was very cool with him, but he kept on hanging around and being a good friend, you know? It's a business, you know? And it just kept growing and growing. He kept growing on it. And then he began to surprise me because I began to find out some of the things that he had done. And I was absolutely amazed. He was an incredible human being. He had been so many places. He had done so many things. It was just incredible. And I was just awed by him. And then in the latter years, he visited me in Hawaii and just had a good time. I mean, we just had good times together and we talked about a lot of things. But all I want to do to tell you about how he was with me, I never knew he was married. Victor and I found out that he was married when we were in the hospital. And I think, when was that, his second wife? It was really very strange. You know a guy for 30 years and never know that he had been married at all. It was kind of odd. Pretty close. Really fairly close, you know. And it was very interesting. But he used to always tell me that he was a year younger than I was. We were born on the same day. And he was supposedly born in 1932. I just found out today he was born in 1930. And he is older than that. I'll never forgive him for that. That's all I want to say.
My name is Carmelie. I rise from Seattle, Washington. And I'm gonna put it out there, Nate scared me. He really scared me. I mean, Tony can tell you when I did he knows I like to talk. So he says, I'm gonna put you out to a test. So I did a play for him at the Seattle Community College, and that was my first time in putting I have this tiny voice, so I know when I get on the camera, it's like, okay, the Minnie Mouse is in town. But he scared me, because when I missed my mark, I come out, he goes, you know you missed your mark, right? Yeah, okay, Nate, okay, But I miss him truly because he was a really strong, resourceful person. I can pick up the phone, Nate, I need this. He can go through it and get you hooked up to anyone and everyone, which was really, really good. I really respect him. And I feel him here, so I'm getting nervous. I'm shaking here. But I have a consignment shop called The Color Purple. And I did a contest trying to get, my consignees to come in and bring in the movie The Color Purple. I couldn't get not one copy to come in. I tried all the warehouses, they couldn't find it. When I finally called my friends, they said, I need the movie The Color Purple in here. Well, if you're looking for it and you can't find it, I think we need to hold on to it. So it took me a year, and I finally said, Nate, I can't find The Color Purple anywhere. He says, oh, what's in your mind? I haven't even opened it. I go, there's my resource person again. So he sent me that copy, and it was just all good from there. But the biggest thing that I'll miss, is that he loved my cabbage soup. If he wanted to drop 10 pounds.
Oh, that was your recipe?
Yes, yes.
Oh,
yes. If he wanted to drop 10 pounds, Carmen, I need the cabbage soup. The last time I made it when he lived in Santa Monica. And I hooked him up, and we're talking about a big kettle. I hooked him up, and he had been around the country trying to get it again. And I said, well, Carmen, I need to fly you out here to make some more cabbage. But man, I just can't drop everything, just come make some cabbage. He says, I said, well, I'm gonna send you the recipe. I guess he's sending off to a few people. This ain't like you. What did you put in? And I go, I don't know, a couple toenails. I don't know. And, I'm a pincher there, and the dash here, and it was good to go. He could not get it right. So the last time he was up here, he was like, okay, you're gonna make me something. And how are you taking it back to Las Vegas? Well, can you freeze it? I mean, now I'm thinking about dry ice and all this just to make sure we got it back to him. But he dropped whatever weight he was looking for. And what I found is that a lot of names that a few places here that I could actually put the names to, because he talked about a lot of you. And I probably got 13 years knowing Nate, and I feel like I've known all of you for all of that year. So this is really good, and I thank you guys for holding us together.
I think we have a few more, Dr. Horton? No, I'll just, Dr. Horton, there's Sherry Collins from Texas. Betty Sweet. You Betty Sweet? Okay. Well, let's.
And Janice Mitchell.
So let's continue with you from Texas.
As was wont, in many instances, I met Nate through Chuck Green. I was living in Chicago at the time, and I don't even remember what circumstance it was, but Chuck and I have always had these interesting conversations, expansive conversations, and he said to me, there's somebody I want you to meet. And so he introduced me to Nate Long. My personal relationship with Nate Long was brief encounters, discussions over the phone, historical issues, etc., until I moved to Texas Southern and became president of Texas Southern University. And we had talked, I met him in the early 80s. And so I was at Texas Southern in 1993, and there were some issues going on, such as there was real need to computerize the whole infrastructure at the university. Everything wasn't online, etc. And so I'm thinking, I need somebody I can trust, somebody who has the expertise, and somebody who has the savvy to work with individuals who don't want to be about moving the change that paradigm. And so I talked to him about coming in as a consultant. He was at Seattle Community College at the time, and he took a leave of absence, and he came down and worked with me for a year and helped to implement that infrastructure. Along the way, he shared some of his very wise sayings, and I'm sure that some of you are aware of his Nate Long's Almanac. One of those things was, the real me is not local. Fire can't burn it, water can't drown it. And so he operated just like that at Texas Southern, leading from the background, so that the persons there perceived that they were the leaders and that they knew what they were doing, but he was always in the background. Likewise, he was one of those persons who consistently provided good advice, sometimes whether you asked and sometimes if you didn't ask. And there were times that he offered advice that I probably didn't want it, but it was good advice. And some of those times were very difficult times, partly because of issues that were going on in the institution. It was in a process of transformation. And when you're in a change paradigm and the board says your job is to help shift this and move this perspective toward the 21st century, and we have some issues of personnel or procedures and infrastructure, then you really have some challenges. But during that period of time, there were 3 incidences that occurred all in the same year that Nate was very beneficial to me because he provided good advice and about dealing with the media and about dealing with people inside the institution. Those 3 things were that 1, a student was killed, and it was perceived that it was drug related. It wasn't on campus, but that's what the perception was. And then I had to deal with the parents. And for anybody to be killed or anybody to die is very difficult. And then dealing with parents and talking to them is another level of difficulty. But he was very helpful. The second was that there was this major flood in Houston, and everybody had to stay home. And fortunately, most of the students were gone from campus, but there were probably 24 who didn't have anywhere to go and were on campus. And so part of what he did was to go over, he went over with me in my knee-high boots, and we made sure that they had food and they were okay and so forth. And he told me how to help manage some of the processes there as well, because there were several different dynamics going on. And then the third was that there was a sniper that was on the top of one of the dormitories that was shooting at students, faculty, staff, and was on top of that facility for approximately 12 hours. And my dealing with the media, dealing with the board, dealing with the students, dealing with everybody, he was very helpful in terms of walking through that process. Now, that was all challenging. It all happened within the space of a year. But the way Nate led and Nate provided support was that he was cool, calm, and collected even under fire. And that strength that he exuded, the encouragement that he provided, the ability to connect with people without them recognizing that they connected with him, allowed him to have some sense of the dynamics that were going on in the institution and in the community, and to provide me with a synthesis of what the dissonance meant. And all too often, we as leaders need someone who will tell us what the dissonance means. It doesn't always mean that it's negative. Sometimes it's just merely dissonance. And to have someone who will be straight with you in terms of telling you what's happening is truly a value. One of the last things I'd like to close with, he's done lots of things. Oh, 2 things. One is I'd like to tell you about his sense of humor. I'm sure you know he had a great sense of humor. I visited him when he was living in Las Vegas, probably maybe it was 1999, 2000, when he was living in Las Vegas. And so he showed me around the city. You know, I'd never seen the city with someone who had been there, who lived there. And he said, okay, I'm going to show you the nightlife. and so we drove to a certain section of town, and then we got on a bus. And we went down to the casinos. So we'd go from casino to casino to casino. And that particular night, as we were wandering through, looking at the architecture, experiencing the events, literally we started at the beginning and did the whole circuit on exactly what he gave me, which was we each had 1 roll of nickels. It was not refreshed. It was 1 roll of nickels. And that was the night on the town. So I'd like to close with another saying from his almanac, which is, karma is the ultimate affirmation. Nate's karma was rich in texture, continues to be, and will always be with each and every one of us. And he truly had an impact on my life, and as having done so, I sincerely hope that I can carry some of what he's given me and give that to others as well. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tony Hopkins from Seattle. I helped Nate write the video production program at Seattle Central Community College. We were teaching the program free. It was part of the cable franchise thing that you had to do if you owned a cable franchise in Seattle. You had to offer classes to the general public. So we were teaching this program for free, and the college came to us and asked us to put together a accredited program, and the program is still running today. So we were there. We put the program together from scratch. I first met Nate though when I was 12 years old. I was a karate student of Nate's, and I didn't. He went away. I went away. I came back, and he came back, and we ended up doing community festivals. And I came in one day, and into the office, in the CCOM office. I hadn't seen him in probably 15 years or so, and Nate was sitting in there, and I said, I said, do you remember me? And he goes, looked at me, he goes, I'm trying to remember. He said, yeah, I think I remember you. I said, I was shorter, I was still kind of heavy. I was a little short guy, and I picked up Jesse, and Jesse was his other karate instructor, who was a 5th Dan karate instructor, and I picked him up across the room, and he said, oh, yeah, he said, you know, Tony, he said, you kind of got a little bigger now. I said, yeah, so that's when I, you know, and we hit it off from there, but I wanted to set the record straight. Nike sits up and says they coined this phrase, just do it. That is a lie. Okay, that's a lie. Anybody that knows anybody from Nike, tell them so. I'll tell them in their face. And Nate Long would say, man, I don't want to hear somebody talk about it if they want to do something. Just come on, just do it. That was Nate. He said, don't talk about it, let's just do it. That's what he would do. And that's the kind of things that he would do. So when you approached Nate, if you had a project, if you wasn't ready to do it, he wouldn't listen to you, you know. So, but I'm gonna miss him a lot. We talk quite frequently, and he was a great friend to all, and all of us from Seattle have to thank Nate Long, because none of us would be in television production, film production, or anything without him being there, and just telling those people up there that we're just going to do this. And without him telling them that we're going to do this, none of us would have been in television today. So,
We're just going to do a few more, and then we want to wind it down, because lunch is here, and then we'll break off into continue to mingle and talk to the side. Sherry?
Yes, I'm Sherilyn Carroll, and I work in public relations for Texas A&M University. And I met Nate, I'm thinking around '94, I had a boss reading him who was really a high-strung individual. And he said, I'm bringing somebody in to handle our video operations. And I thought, okay, whatever. So he says, this guy is Nate Long, and you're going to love him. And I thought, oh yeah, if he's anything like you, sure I'm going to love him. Well, meet Nate Long, and I'm thinking, oh my God. First I was floored because he was black. You got to understand, Texas A&M University is a predominantly white institution. So the last thing that I thought is that his boss that I had, that was the most high-strung boss in the entire world, would be bringing in a brother to handle our video operations. He said, Sherry, I want you to learn from him, because when he leaves, you're going to handle all the video operations. I'm thinking, oh yeah, right, we'll see. So he comes in, and we're working on a project, and I totally disagreed with Nate's approach to the project. I just said, Nate, you're wrong. Well, I'm kind of a high-strung kind of woman, too. I said, Rennie, you're wrong. You're both wrong. The approach needs to be this. And my boss, Rennie Henry, said to me, Sherry, when you have all the credentials that Nate Long has, then I'll listen to you. But until that time, I'm going to listen to him. Nate Long said, Rennie, sit down and shut up and listen to Sherry. And I sat there and I thought, oh my God, that's the kind of individual Nate Long was. If you could give him a better idea about how to do something, it didn't matter how much work he had, how much experience he had, he would listen. And that was the most wonderful thing. And probably after that point, we became very, very close. I think Nate Long is probably one of the finest individuals I have ever met in my entire life. And still today, it's hard for me to believe that he's not here. I wasn't going to come because I gotta be honest with you, I work for a university, and the university, you know, it's not cheap to fly here. I talked to Joanne, and Joanne said, Sherry, you need to come, it's the right thing to do. And I knew that because Nate believed in networking. And I'm just so delighted to be in a room full of a group of exceptional individuals who I know Nate Long called his friends, and he said it's important for the friends to get together. And I'm really sorry that we had to get together under these circumstances, but I'm delighted to be here, and I am delighted and honored to call Nate Long a friend.
Hi, I'm Kimberly Norton, and many of you may have heard of me as Kimberly Bruget. I got married recently. But I want to tell you a little story, and you'll learn about how Nate, the kind of person he is. Most of you probably already know this. But a couple of years ago, I went through a deep, deep state of depression. And Nate said, Kim, what you need to do is just get out there. Just get on a plane and come up here, and I'll take care of everything. So I booked the plane, and I came up here. And I don't know if I was here for a couple of days or a week or whatever, because I was so depressed. I was just out of it. And every time I'd go off into space, he'd go, we're not going to have that. And so I stayed in his apartment. He let me have his bed. He went on the second floor, he slept. And he'd get up in the morning, he'd say, "Time to get up." He'd open up the blinds. I go, "Oh God, don't show me any light." And he'd say, "No, we're not gonna have that." And he put me in his car and he drove me all around the city. And he did things that most people would want to see. Like he would show me some big mansion. It's like, I didn't care. He'd drive me by the Gill. I didn't care. He wanted to take me in to see a movie. I didn't care. He just tried everything. And then finally he took me to, I think it was like the Gulf or where the ocean was or something. And we were getting ready to walk to it. And I said, "Well, I'll slow down so you can keep up with me." He said, "What are you talking about? I don't need you to slow down." And somehow we made a quarter bet that I would run to the meter and that he couldn't beat me. And so I said, "Well, you know, I'm just going to be easy on this old man. I'll just take my time." And I looked around. He wasn't behind me. I said, "Who's this man?" It was Nate. And I said, "Okay, Nate, I'll bet you another quarter, but this time I'm going to really put in my afterburner because I was just letting you do that." So he said, "Let's go." He said, "I'll just give you a head start." I said, "No, I won't. I can't do you wrong with you, old man." He said, "No, I'll give you a head start." So he gave me a little head start. I said, "Let's go." And I went to the truck and boy, I'm just going and going. So something just comes passing by me. I'm like, "What is that?" He was up there past me and I stopped and I was, he said, what are you breathing hard for?" And I think a little bit after that, I started cheering up. And when I got back, I was much better and my life just started turning around. Everybody was like, "What happened? You went to California, you know, what happened?" I said, "No, I was just there with a friend." And I dare you to find any other friend who would have done that, because you won't find it. There are only a few friends I have. That's my family, and Nate was the other one. So when Sherry asked me if I come here, first thing I said is yes. There's no question about it, yes. Wherever we're going to fly to, I'll just get a plane ticket and I'll come. And I'm just glad to meet all of you who loved him too. There you go.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Donna Brown-Guillaume, and a lot of you are old friends of Nate from a long time ago, but some of us are relatively new friends of Nate. And I'm one of those. I met him here at the African American Steering Committee at the Directors Guild. And my comment is just very brief because everyone has a lot of stories. But Nate was someone who gave so completely of whatever resources he had available to him. And you know, like Dick said, you kind of wondered if he was the police because he sat back so quiet sometimes at meetings, but whenever he said something, all of us would go, "Yeah, that makes a lot of sense." He was very, very wise, but yet very soft-spoken, never forced his will on anybody, but very frequently he was absolutely right, whatever he said. And a couple of years ago, our committee did a tribute to Sidney Poitier, and Nate and Reggie and some of us here in the room were on the committee to put that event together. And Nate called me up one day and said, Nate was on the committee too, and he called one day and he said, "Well, you know, you got to look at this film and this film and this film." We were like, yeah. We knew all of Sidney's films and we were finding them. And then he says, "Oh, and don't forget the Ebony interview from 1977. I'm like, "Nate, where am I going to find that?" He goes, I have a copy." He had it. He knew exactly where to find it. He Xeroxed it. He dropped it in the mail to me. I mean, he was just like that. He was so resourceful. He was so generous. He had so much behind-the-scenes information about so many wonderful people, and he was always willing to share that. So his ability to kind of reach to the younger generation of people here in the Directors Guild and give us a few pointers and some wisdom was one of the things that I think kept him going. He really enjoyed being here with us, and I'll miss him a lot.
Thank you. Janice, did you have something to say?
Yes. My name is Janice Mitchell, and I came to Los Angeles from the East Coast doing morning radio back there, and I was making a changeover from going on the air into the recording industry doing marketing and promotions. I sat behind the mic, and I'd always sit there, and the promoters would come in, they'd have music, and they'd take you to lunch. That was a little interesting, because you get out of that 6x9 box of a room, and so I was intrigued by it. So I came to Los Angeles, and I got a job doing independent promotion. And in that same building, which was at 6464 Sunset, was an office called T-Back. And I was on the elevator one day, and I bumped into a lady. I didn't know many people, and I bumped into a lady, and that lady happened to be Betty Sweet. And we were talking about where she worked, and I was telling her about the office that I worked in. This same building was where Motown used to be before they moved into another location. And so she says, well, we're doing TV shows for children, and you say you're from radio, and we need somebody that can maybe, you know, do some voiceovers because we got to get commercials. So she introduced me to the people in the office, and the office was full of women. That's one thing I do remember. And then I met the boss, and his name was Nate Long. And I got hired for the job, along with my other job. That was a great way to come to Los Angeles for me. And so that's how I met Nate Long. Time went on, and I went back to the East Coast when I had illness come about in my family. And I grew up in the area near Howard University. And somehow or another, I was on the campus, walked right into Nate Long about 12 years later. And he was there doing projects for Howard University. I'd say about 10 more years go by. My daughter is about 10 years old. I'm living in Lancaster, California, and my folks' number stayed the same, and Nate reached out, and he contacted me. And so I wrote something when Nate passed. It's amazing how you cross paths with people in your lifetime. So please forgive me for reading from the paper, but it's on here, and I'm just going to read from there. We've all heard the saying, what do you give to the man that has everything? Nate Long was that kind of a person indeed. I don't mean just materially, because material things are far from the true meaning of having everything, if you know what I mean. But indeed, Nate Long had everything that really meant something to the true sense of the word. He had a love for Jesus. He had a love for family and friends. He was true and enduring in his friendships to all that were considered friends. He always had a positive attitude. He was a man who thrived off of knowledge and education. He was a man that only spoke the truth. Only spoke the truth. Like it or not. Nate Long had common sense. He had respect of person. High moral values, very high moral values, not to mention a lot of class, along with intelligence beyond the average individual, including a true desire and compassion to see all mankind do well in life. In the 25 years that I have known Nate, he has definitely shown me the epitome of a gentleman and a scholar, with his never-ending devotion to education and our youth to excel against all odds. There are many of his peers, friends, and scholars that are here today. They can tell you of his many, many accomplishments in film, television, and the entertainment industry as a whole, from his beginnings as a stuntman to helping organizations develop, even at the grassroots level. And one of his main goals was to make sure and to see people in all those qualified to unify in these areas and to reach for equality to the fullest potential. I hope I wasn't confusing you with that. Brother Nate holds a very dear and special place in my life and heart. And if I tell you he was a happy man, he was a very happy man. The unexpected timing of him having illnesses that were totally news to him, once again, made him step right up to the plate and submit himself to the care of the doctors that he so respected and trusted. Nate always did things his way, in advance, and with all the information possible at hand that he may need to refer to. And so at this point, I think I've said about enough about the man that was always there for me and so many others. And all I can say is at this point, I'm glad, happy, and thankful to God that you are all here for him right now today. God bless you, and never forget the great man, Nathaniel Long, better known as Nate.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm Lance, right? My name is Betty Sweet, and I'm the point person when Nate went into the hospital, we took him, Kay and I, we took him to the hospital and we talked, and he walked in there healthy, seemed like to me, and happy, you know. And as soon as they put him on that chemotherapy, every day, everybody said he went so fast, but I was there every day. Every day I would come, and it was the sores in the mouth, or the hiccups, or even it just got worse and worse, and they killed him. And I was very resentful toward those people for a long time. But Nate was always there for me. And I don't want to sound sacrilegious or anything, but you know how they say God may not come when you want him, but he's always on time? Nate came when I wanted him. And I want to thank you for having this tribute to Nate. He so deserves it, and he's like the best man in the world to me. Thank you.
Ms. Graves, will you last one? Ms. Graves.
I hope you can all hear me. I also. Okay. All right, I have a tiny voice and I do need a microphone. I met Nate in New York in about 1972, and Nate and I have been friends ever since. But like Nate in my life is like the Nate in everybody else's life here. I don't need to reiterate that because you come, you go, you disappear. I'm a boss lady. There are times I didn't see Nate for 10 years, then there's Nate.
That's right.
Knocking on my door or whatever. But I think that Nate was an anchor in a lot of people's lives. He was someone you could depend on. He was always there. And he just kind of grows on you and becomes your friend, and you look up one day and you realize you have a person in your life who is a friend, and you know that that person is a friend and is there for you. There were a couple, I don't want to keep everyone because I have vignettes to tell. My birthday's April 5th, Nate's birthday's April 6th, and so that's fire on fire. We would clash, Nate would walk out, Nate would come back, you know, but I was his friend. We were friends, a true friend. And some things about Nate that maybe some of you don't know, others may. Nate grew up more or less as an orphan. His love for clothes and the coordinated look comes from that life that he led as a child. Nate was working on some more projects, as he always will be, and probably still is up there working on a project. But it was animated series on hip-hop rap, a black family that he wanted to put together, and he had already begun working on. He was also working on a biography, and I was so looking forward to this biography that he was doing because I knew some of the vignettes that or stories from his life that he was telling, and as from this gathering here today and the stories that you all tell, just put that in a book and it would be interesting, but coming from the man himself would be absolutely fascinating.